It's been about 12 years now. So I don't really feel the loss of my mom so much. But today's one of those days. And I'm sure many of us feel the same way. My mom was wonderful, and had her issues as well. She was 23 when she had me. I was her oldest. And we walked through some dark times together. Not just times for her, but times for me as well. By the time I was a teenager, maybe in my early 20s, I had become fairly addicted and very selfish. And I wasn't the world's greatest son. And I remember we were having a heart-to-heart one day, and she said, "I really don't like you very much, but I will always love you." So when I asked myself about today, and I said, so how do we honor mothers? I guess for me it was about maybe becoming somebody my mom would like. So what does that mean? What are those qualities that we really look at? And to me, it all goes back to something that Jesus said when he tried to change the course of his church. It's what we call the imitatio Dei, how we imitate God. How are we like God? What's that supposed to be? What does that smell like? When we go to be divine, what we really are, what does that mean to us? Back in his day, the word on the street for hundreds of years had been, if you want to be like God, you have to be holy. Okay? And culturally, what that had morphed into was you had to be clean. So there were all these laws and all these rules about all the things that you could and couldn't do, all the clothes that you couldn't wear, all the stuff that you couldn't eat, all the people that you could not touch. And then he comes along and says, no, that's really not it. That's not it at all. So if you want to be like God, you have to be compassionate. And the word that he used, and I've talked about this before, the word that he used, idiomatically translated, is not compassionate. It's actually womb-like and literally womb-ish, which was a complete slap in the face to the religious types of his time, because to them, anything that had to do with lady parts was really dirty, and you didn't talk about that, and you certainly didn't want to aspire to be like that. Right? So here's this yokel, this handyman, saying that to be like God, that's what we need to be like. But when we examine the qualities that he was talking about, it makes a lot of sense. What does a womb do? It protects us. It nourishes us. It supports us. It contains us. It loves us. And it gives to us without asking for a damn thing in return. It just gives, because that's what it does. And it didn't matter whether the woman carrying the child was one of those lucky women who really loves being pregnant, or one of those ones that is sick the whole time and has a miserable time. That child being held inside only knew support, only knew love, only knew nourishment. So when Jesus said that God is that, That was one brand spanking new idea for everybody to wrap their minds around, because until that time, God was more of an angry, jealous, judgy king type who needed to be obeyed and worshiped and have all the laws obeyed. And Jesus said, no, that's not the deal. That's not the deal at all. So, when we aspire today to be wombish, to be compassionate, to be something our moms could be proud of and could like, I look around and I actually see some really amazing examples of that. Some of them right here. Our Youth and Families Director, Kristen Knight. She's amazing, and I've said several times she's the best decision I've made in 3.5 years of ministry. She's got 3 kids that are preschool aged, and she's having so much fun, she's looking at Jeff and saying, maybe? One more? And that's what Jeff says. But, and it's really funny. I was thinking about it, like by comparison, the last time I got shipped overseas, I shared an office for a year with the sergeant who was, kind of like my administrative assistant. And she met a guy who was a sailor while we were there. We were at a joint base. She ended up getting married. She got out of the National Guard, but he's still full-time Navy. They're married now. They have a couple of kids. Both of hers are, like preschool. And Sergeant Bonk was completely, she was highly squared away. And she's got 2 kids, and she is crying on Facebook all the time. Right? And, Kristen's like, yeah, I got this. I could do another one. And you know what? Bring me 30 kids. I'm on to that. And the atmosphere that kind of love leads to has just been a place that has exploded in this church. It's our youth ed department is simply filled with love and light and energy. And if you spend any time down there, you'll know about it. One other funny little note before I talked to Kristen about, maybe becoming our youth ed director, I called her Mom. Just because who knows you like your mom, right? And I've also been blessed to be with a lot of other people who are channeling that divine feminine energy. Laura Bernstein, who heads the Bards, the youth Shakespeare troupe that's here, is doing an amazing job with all of them. But it comes from, her pool of divine feminine love. We were talking about being parents one day, and she told me that when she first saw her oldest daughter, Charlie, that up until that moment, all she knew of love was like an oil slick. And when she looked at Charlie, it was like she could finally see the ocean. And that ocean of love is something that she pours over all these kids that come from all kinds of walks of life. But the one thing that they all, and I could probably say we all, because I'm a bard too, that we all have in common is we were the kids that kind of would end up eating lunch by ourselves. We are, self-described weirdos, nerds, geeks. The bullied, the picked on. But in that group, just like downstairs here, and it's fun that they, end up using the same room, the same space. It's a safe space for those kids, and not only a safe space, but a place where they can grow and stretch and be things that they didn't know that they could be. And I think when we talk about being wombish, we're creating that container for each other to become something that we never knew we could become. We all hold that for each other if we can see the ocean. And Wanda LaRosa Lear, is she here? I was talking to Wanda earlier this week at a little gathering of the very first small group that we had. We kind of had a going away party. Wanda works at the Urban Ministries, and they do amazing work in this town. I asked her for the short version of it, and she went on for about 10 minutes of all the things that they're doing. They don't just have a soup kitchen. They provide food and education on how to eat nourishing food. I think they do like an organic garden. It's just crazy the amount of stuff that they're doing. She works with kids in a program that they have specifically for kids. This all began 40 years ago when, during all of the layoffs that accompanied, sort of the death of the steel industry in Birmingham, one woman decided to start cooking for people who were hungry in her kitchen in her home. One person. And it kind of grew and grew, and finally I think one of the Methodist churches picked it up as a mission. And it has now become an organization that affects thousands. Because one person could be that compassionate person as God is compassionate. So today, when I look at what we're called to be, this is not just something that affects us in our families. It's not just something that affects us in our church. It's not just something that affects us in civic organizations. It affects the very nature and fabric of our country and our world. People who are not raised with this loving energy around them, like our kids get downstairs, and like the kids in the Bards get, and like the kids that show up for Wanda's program get. They end up reaching out to something else. Right now, we are losing kids to heroin and opioid addiction at a higher rate than any time I can remember. And then we have people who get addicted to things like money and power. And we can look around and see what that's doing as well. So, what I want us to do today is to kind of ask that question, like the young man who asked Jesus and said, what do I need to do to get into the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus told him, and he said, but what do I really need to do? And because Jesus knew he was a rich kid, he said, well, you need to sell all your stuff, give the money to the poor, and follow me. And the kid went away sad. He's like, I'm not giving up my stuff, man. And Jesus said, it's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to get into the kingdom of heaven. And really all he's saying is somebody who's addicted, somebody that puts their focus on the oil slick instead of the ocean. So what I'm going to ask everyone to do, what I'm going to challenge you to do this Mother's Day, is to honor your mother, honor all of our mothers, honor the mothers in our life, honor this Mother Earth that we live on. By finding within yourself, no matter how much of a dude you are, those qualities that are wombish, those qualities of love, unconditional love, of the ability to just give and give freely, to be able to support, to be able to nourish, to be able to encourage, to be able to create a space where others can become amazing things they never knew were possible. I challenge you to look beyond the oil slick and see the ocean. And to love people that are really hard to like today until they can learn to love themselves. Thank you. Happy Mother's Day.